Hello and welcome back everyone, my name is Ron and today we are going to be going over Engineer's best overclocks for each weapon. So I'm going to pick one of these, and first up we're going to start out with Warthog Auto Shotgun. The shotgun has pretty solid overclocks. Unfortunately it is one of the weapons that only has 5 overclocks. Not entirely sure why that is. I don't recall there ever being a 6th one added, but it would be really nice if they did add a 6th overclock to this, or even make it a 7th one. For the best overclock, I would give this one to lightweight magazines. This one is kind of a basic overclock, but it's really good. And it makes it so the Warthog is very flexible, because without this, and you're just playing with the regular Warthog, most people tend to build one of two ways, either going for turret whip or just going for full auto, and both build almost the same. With this one, you can kind of build the Warthog however you'd like, and all this does is give you 18 more shells and gives you a 0.4 second faster reload time, so you go from 2 seconds to 1.6. This is even faster if you reload cancel the Warthog. It makes it so you have like a 0.9 second reload or something. It's very fast, and I would say that it's a great choice. There is some other great choices for the Warthog though that I could see people arguing. One would be mini shells. Mini shells is really nice. You get a ton of extra rounds. Although if you still want to be able to one-shot headshot grunts, you're going to have to build for damage. So you're going to have to go for pellets in tier 2 and damage in tier 4. You could also argue cycle overload because of the extra damage it gives you, even though then you're using your shotgun pretty much only at kind of closest range. It does give you a bunch of damage per second. All around pretty solid overclocks though for the Warthog, so plenty of great options there. Up next we got Stubby, the SMG. This one is kind of a difficult one because Stubby is another weapon that doesn't really have any bad overclocks. For best Stubby overclock, I think I'd pick turret EM discharge. It's a real close toss-up between this one and EM refire booster though. Refire booster is way more straightforward and I think I use it more often. However, turret EM discharge gives you a lot of value. You can clear up enemies with it very easily. It slows down crowds a lot. You can make your ammo last for a very long time, so if you are having ammo issues with Engineer, this might be a great option for you. The way that you use turret EM discharge is that you have to shoot your turrets, and then once your electricity chance procs on the turret, this will send out a wave that zaps everything around it, dealing damage and slowing everything down. It has a very big explosion radius, and it doesn't really do that much friendly fire damage, so it's really easy to hit your friends with, because I think this is a 6 meter radius, I want to say. Oh, 5 meter radius, sorry. I'm reading it right now. I was thinking it was a little bit larger than that, but it's great. It slows down things, especially if you have 2 turrets. It's very easy to keep popping these. It can be a little bit more difficult if you start getting overrun. That's why I really like pairing this with lures, but other than that, it's a very solid overclock for just about every mission. Now, there is a lot of other good overclocks for Stubby too. Like I said, refire booster is fantastic. It's just more rate of fire, more damage, but more spread, so not really a big deal if you're using Stubby only at close to medium range. I could also see turret arc being argued up here too. The problem with turret arc, at least for me, is the amount of time that you have to kind of invest to get used to turret arc. Turret arc can be super strong, but it plays kind of different than what you would think. It deals really high damage, it slows down enemies, it's great for clearing up crowds, and it's great on Dreadnought missions because you can slow down the Dreadnought a lot and do passive damage over time. It's actually really good if you have multiple engineers because you don't need all the engineers to be running turret arc. You only need one engineer. You can use this on any other turret. Same goes with any other turret ability, so turret whip, turret arc, or turret EM discharge. Doesn't matter if you own the turret or if it's another engineer's, you can use it the same way. Moving on to the Loki Smart Rifle. For the best overclock here, this one is another kind of toss-up because I could see either of these being argued. I'm going to go with explosive chemical rounds, however I could see people arguing Executioner. Executioner is the far more simple, far more straightforward overclock, and a very strong overclock, especially on like Dreadnought missions. But once you get used to explosive chemical rounds, it can do a lot of work for you. What explosive chemical rounds does is the third target that you've put on an enemy. It doesn't necessarily have to be the third shot, but you do need to have 3 targets on at least one enemy. This will cause that shot to explode. Again, you don't necessarily need 3 shots, so if you put 3 shots, or I guess 3 targets onto something like a swarmer, 1 bullet will kill it. But since you've already put 3 targets on it, it will still explode the same way explosive chemical rounds would work. Otherwise, if you just put like 2 on there, it would just fire 1 bullet and kill them anyway. So you're still using up 1 bullet, but it is more useful to get the explosion off because it can spread to multiple enemies. This explosion does 50 damage to all enemies around it, and it's just flat damage, so there's no modifiers, I don't believe, to anything. I could be wrong about that, but I think everything takes the same amount of damage from this. This also produces a fear effect around the explosion, so enemies might run away from it. This comes at the cost of you losing out on damage, which doesn't really matter because the explosives are going to make up a lot more damage. And you do lose out on ammo. That one hurts a bit more, but you can take extra ammo in Tier 1. and be pretty good. The best way to use this is just to target 3, or just put 3 targets on one enemy, and just use this as a burst fire assault rifle. Now, as I said, a runner-up to this one would definitely be Executioner. Executioner is super strong, and this one gives you just a ton more weak spot damage for the downsides of you not being able to lock on as many times, but that's not really a downside when you can have like your tier 5 that gives you more damage when things are locked on. I can even see Seeker Rounds being argued up here too, because Seeker Rounds is really good on Dreadnought missions where you can just shoot right through everything, and yeah, that's really nice to have. It's also really convenient because the bullets kind of warp around. It's kind of weird the way the bullets work with Seeker Rounds, but it is nice so that you're not potentially shooting allies as well. Downside of it is that slow rate of fire, but that is a pretty fair trade-off in my opinion. Alright, then we move on to Engineer Secondaries. First up, we have the Deep Core 40mm PGL Grenade Launcher. This one has a lot of really good overclocks. The Grenade Launcher does not have any bad overclocks. All of them are pretty great. For my pick for best overclock, I think I'm going to go with Hyper Propellant for this one, but that is a really tough call because you've got so many great ones. You got RJ250, you've got... Both your cleans are actually pretty solid, even though they're kind of basic. They're still really good. And you got nukes. Nukes are great. You also got the compact rounds, which come at almost no cost for you getting a whole bunch of shots. So you got so many great options here, but I think I'd pick Hyper Propellant. This one pretty much turns your grenade launcher into a railgun. You have extremely long range now because the grenade barely drops at all at any distance. You can actually make it even crazier if you want to put even more speed on it. I wouldn't recommend that, but you could do it if you want. This also amps up your damage a lot. You can one-shot a lot of enemies in the game, no matter what difficulty you're on with this. Downsides to this one, though, is that you no longer have a big explosion. So you can't really hit multiple enemies with this. It's really difficult to hit more than one enemy with Hyper Propellant. And you also lose out on ammo. So it is a more specialized weapon. You're going to be relying more on your primary weapon and your turrets to deal with crowds, but Hyper Propellant will help you destroy anything big. Dreadnoughts, Oppressors, Praetorians, anything like that. Lots of runners up for this one. You could realistically pick any of them because they're all really strong. Fat Boy is great. You get nukes. It's really good against crowds. It's potentially easy to blow yourself up with, and you don't get very many shots, so you have to make up for that with your primary weapon, or you have to be getting a lot of resupplies, or you just have to have a team that's really just handing you nukes. RJ250, great overclock, lets you have more mobility, which Engineer is kind of lacking. You don't usually move around that much. Up next, we got a Breech Cutter, and this one's probably going to come at no surprise to anyone. This is going to go to lightweight cases. I've already made a video talking about why I think lightweight cases is the strongest overclock in the game. And people brought up some pretty good points saying that lightweight cases on its own is not really the strongest overclock. It's just that it buffs the Breech Cutter, and the Breech Cutter is arguably the strongest weapon, which, yeah, I can understand that reasoning too. You could argue something like Hyper Propellant or Volatile Bullets is far more impactful to the weapon because of how much it changes. Hyper Propellant gives you tons of extra damage and gives you pinpoint accuracy with a weapon that really doesn't have those, so it changes the weapon entirely. Lightweight cases just gives you more ammo for the Breech Cutter, which functions exactly the same. Well, it does give you a faster reload too, but usually I don't bother with that just because I'm running Born Ready with it and rarely reload the Breech Cutter. So the 0.2 extra seconds, yeah, it's whatever. It's mostly that 3 extra ammo, and if you build all for ammo, you get like 27 rounds with the Breech Cutter. You don't even need to be directly behind like a Praetorian, Oppressor, Dreadnought to hit its weak spot. You can just fire right through it. It's just such a solid weapon, and this is just a nice overclock that complements it more. So I could see other ones being argued here though too. A lot of people like Return to Sender. You can potentially get double your value per shot even though you have less shots. It's still a super fun overclock to use. I could also see like High Voltage Crossover where it just gives you a bonus, not really much of a downside since it just takes away your magazine size, and that's it, which you arguably don't even need with the Breech Cutter. I could also see Spinning Death being picked as people's favorites too, just for the spectacle of it. Maybe not the strongest, but it is super satisfying to watch Spinning Death just sit there and be a blender and chop up everything. And then for our final secondary, we've got the Shard Diffractor. And for this one, I would pick Overdrive Booster. This one was also a really difficult choice. The Shard Diffractor's got a lot of really fun overclocks and some really cool ones, but I do think Overdrive Booster has the potential of being the strongest overclock here, just because you don't necessarily need to use this. And if you don't use it, you're basically just using the standard Shard Diffractor, which is still a really good weapon, and you can use it for crowds as well as picking off things like web and acid spitters from miles away. Overdrive Booster lets you crank this up, but you have to sit in place. It's very similar to Lead Spray or Lead Storm with the minigun, where it locks you in place, and you can't move from it, but you get a ton of extra damage. You can technically break that by just using your pickaxe, but it will consume all your ammo, so you don't usually want to do that. And this one just makes it for a great option if you need to use it, to just flip it on to kill oppressors, praetorians, dreadnoughts. It's really good on dreadnought missions. If you build it for full damage, you can kill them incredibly fast. Other great overclocks I could see being the Catalyst. This one does a ton of damage, and it's super fun to use. I really like the way they reworked this one. It is really easy to blow yourself up with, though, and it's not always the most consistent. And if enemies just kind of end up body blocking your platforms, it can kind of not work out for you. But if everything lines up for you, it can clear up hordes and big things really easily. It's actually super fun to use, and if this was just pure fun, then this one would probably be the winner here. I could also see Volatile Impact Reactor being picked because it's really good. The downsides are really not that big of a deal, and you essentially get floor fires with Engineer, which is great. That's great on Driller. It's great on Engineer too. So a lot of great options there, and not really a whole lot of bad options either with the Shard Diffractor. So that's my opinion on all of Engineer's best overclocks. Next up, we're going to be doing Engineer's worst overclocks. That should be a lot of fun too. It's going to be kind of difficult though, because a lot of these weapons really don't have bad overclocks or any bad overclocks. Tell me your thoughts on Engineer's best overclocks for each of their weapons down in the comments below. I'd be really interested in hearing that. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and special thanks to my supporters. These are my members over here on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this, and if you'd like to have that, you can. There are links down in the description of this video, as well as the join button down here on YouTube. I really do appreciate that. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye!